Hey there, M.A. Truth here, getting ready to finish reading chapter 12 from the book The Secret Destiny of America by Manly P. Hall. This particular edition includes two classic works of the mysterious origins and unique mission of America. Um, so, chapter 12 is where we were, and I'm going to start at that last paragraph and we're going to continue on. It's not that much to this, so this will be kind of short. It says here the high civilization attained by the Mayas was due primarily to the laws given them by Quetzalcoatl. Again, if I butchered that name or the pronunciation, I apologize. So long as they obeyed these laws, they continued to prosper. Unfortunately, we have no complete record of their legal codes, but we do know a few of the outstanding principles which lay at the root of their state. Okay. The Mayan nation was a collective commonwealth living under an advanced form of socialized order. They possessed all goods in common and shared equally in the benefits of their production. They possessed no money or monetary symbol of any kind, and it has been suggested that this lack of currency was in part responsible for their 500 years of peace. To them, the wheel was the symbol of death, and they never developed any form of mechanized industry. Each gave a part of his goods to maintain the state, and this contribution was employed to build public buildings, parks, schools, and places of public sport. There seems to have been no poverty and little, if any, crime. No buildings have been found which suggest prisons or other places of confinement. The Mayas were hospitable, kindly, gentle, and industrious. Their cities were beautiful in every way. They were public-spirited, well-governed, and according to the order of their time, highly educated. The religious temper of the people can be gathered from remnants that still survive. It is common to all the Indians of the Americas that religious intolerance is utterly beyond their comprehension. They look upon each man's religion as his own particular belief, and if it suits his needs, it deserves the respect of all other right-minded men. Thus, we see that the archetype for a generous and enlightened way of life is part of the American continent's common inheritance. It is well to note in passing that many of the simpler virtues practiced by the Mayas were shared by other tribes that inhabited North and South America. Although the North American Indian never achieved the high culture reached by the Mayas, all lived according to a democratic tradition. The members of all tribes took care of their aged, provided for the widowed and the fatherless, and severely punished in the rare instances when some tribesmen attempted to exploit another. Tribal government was invested in a council of the order, and the wiser in all matters relating to the common good were submitted to them for arbitration and solution. Crime was almost unknown. As most tribes were nomadic, they have little opportunity to develop intertribal points of view, and so there was considerable strife between tribes. But even in their warfare, North American Indians respected valor and developed chivalry to a marked degree. The first League of Nations was created among the Great Lakes Indians of the American Northeast. First 5 tribes and later 7 combined under the leadership of the brilliant Indian leader, Great Rabbit, whose life was descended to us in Longfellow's poem, Hiawatha. The League of the Seven Nations was originally intended to be defensive, but also useful in settling intertribal disputes. It resulted from the simple discovery by Aboriginal minds that one lived longer, more safely, and more happily if disputes among peoples were solved by arbitration rather than open strife. Hang on. The Incas of Peru are second to the Mayas in the building of empire in America. Inca communities were also cooperative and many of these villages still survive in the distant and less accessible highlands of the Andes. These were the only civilized communities in our land that never learned that there was a word depression beginning in 1929. Rooted in the American continent is a long and distinguished tradition that points towards ability for leadership in the post-war world along lines of cooperation and an international point of view. The democracy, established by 13 colonies in 1776, was not the first American democracy. At least 200 years before the coming of the white man, the spirit of humanity, of human equality, human cooperation, and freedom of worship flourished here. Well, even he had enough sense to say it. Before the white man. Seems like everybody was able to deal with and do what they had to do to keep themselves and their families and their tribes together before the white man. What can we say? What can we say? This white devil has destroyed everything he's come in contact with. That mentality has decimated, devalued everything it has come in contact with. But we indigenous people, we aboriginals, we the first peoples of this land, we've got to get our acts together. We've got to come together. And that's really what this is about. The fact that we have been separated from our culture, from our language. We know nothing of who we were, but we've got to work on it, folks. That's how we survive. Safety in numbers. Peace amongst our tribes. But we've got to fight to come together. Anyway, that's all I got to say on this for right now. I think we'll move on to chapter 10, 11, 12, 13. Bacon's Secret Society is set up in America. That might be a good one to start on. So I'll read the first little portion of it, and we'll pick up on it later. Men bound by a secret oath to labor in the cause of world democracy decided that in the American colonies they would plant the roots of a new way of life. Brotherhoods were established to meet secretly, and they quietly and industriously conditioned America to its destiny for leadership in a free world. Benjamin Franklin exercised an enormous psychological influence in colonial politics. As the appointed spokesman of the unknown philosophers, he did not make laws, but his words became law. You know, I find it interesting. I'm just speaking. I find it interesting how a people would leave their land and claim that they're going to go somewhere else, destroy the inhabitants of the new land, and then claim it for themselves and decry how free they are. What a bunch of crap. And it only goes to show you how sick these folks are, because they're still practicing colonialism. They're still practicing that. And I heard someone say, it's not about white supremacy, because they're not supreme in anything. It's about white insecurity. How you like that? They're insecure because they have nothing of their own. They have absorbed every culture that they have come across. They've absorbed and taken from the natural people wherever their foot has landed, taken from them, taken the other people's culture, taken the other people's language, writings, teachings, everything, and twisted and perverted it and used it for themselves. It's a sick bunch of folk we dealing with, y'all. But the way that we overcome all of that is through overstanding. We've got to study. And even that's in the good book. Study to show yourself approved, a workman who needs not be ashamed. Okay? We got to study, folk. We got to study our enemies. And we've got to learn from our ancestors. And believe it or not, if you give it a minute and think about it, we are our ancestors. It's in our memory. It's in our DNA. And we've got to go within. And we've got to pull that information out. Well, that's all I got today, y'all. Hope you enjoyed that little short reading. Like I said, I'm going to pick up on chapter 13 in the next couple of days. Peace. Love you all. And may truth out.